The moving truck had barely disappeared when I realized the only person waiting inside my empty apartment wasn't family, wasn't a friend from childhood, and wasn't someone I had ever imagined would become my home. She was asleep on my old gray couch, still wearing yesterday's sweater, exhausted after spending the entire day helping me pack, lift, clean, and rebuild a life I had almost convinced myself wasn't worth rebuilding. Looking at her, I laughed quietly and whispered, almost as a joke, "At this point, you should just move in." Without even opening her eyes completely, she smiled with the calm certainty of someone who had already made peace with her heart and softly answered, "Which side of the bed is mine?" In that single moment, every wall I had built after years of disappointment began to crumble. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel. Every story we share becomes even more meaningful because people like you choose to spread hope. For almost 7 years, Rowan Mercer believed he had become an expert at surviving disappointment. At 38, he owned a modest furniture restoration business that kept the bills paid but never left much room for dreams. His workshop smelled of fresh cedar, old varnish, and patience. Customers admired how he could make broken tables look new again, but no one knew he secretly wished people could be repaired as easily as wood. Years earlier, an engagement had ended only weeks before the wedding after discovering that the woman he loved had quietly built another life behind his back. The betrayal didn't make him bitter toward everyone. It simply convinced him that love belonged to luckier people. He stopped accepting invitations to dinner parties because someone always tried to introduce him to another single woman. He laughed off every suggestion that he deserved another chance. Whenever friends asked whether he would date again, he smiled politely and changed the subject. His heart had not stopped beating. It had simply learned to stay quiet. Then Maren Elwood walked into his workshop carrying a cracked oak rocking chair that had belonged to her late grandmother. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply asked whether the chair could be saved because it had been the one place where every generation of her family had been held as babies. Rowan examined the broken joints and smiled gently before saying that almost anything could be repaired if someone cared enough to take the time. She laughed and answered that she hoped the same was true for people. Those words stayed with him long after she left. When Maren returned to collect the chair, she brought homemade cinnamon bread because she believed gratitude should never be expressed only with money. Rowan hadn't tasted bread that reminded him of childhood in years. They talked for nearly an hour about ordinary things that somehow felt extraordinary. They discussed favorite books, old neighborhoods, difficult parents, forgotten dreams, and why old furniture deserved another chance instead of being thrown away. Friendship came naturally. Every Thursday afternoon, Maren stopped by the workshop after finishing her job at the local library. Sometimes she brought coffee. Sometimes she brought books she insisted he would enjoy. Sometimes she simply sat nearby while he worked, reading quietly as sunlight poured through the workshop windows. Neither of them forced conversations. Comfortable silence became its own language. Months passed before anyone outside noticed how often they were together. People assumed they were dating. They weren't. At least not officially. Rowan refused to believe someone as warm as Maren could genuinely see a future with someone carrying so much emotional baggage. One afternoon she casually mentioned that someone had asked her out. Rowan congratulated her. She smiled politely but looked disappointed by his reaction. She declined the invitation anyway. He never asked why. Spring eventually brought unexpected changes. Rowan's landlord announced the old building housing both his apartment and workshop had been sold. Everyone had 3 months to move. For Rowan, it felt like another reminder that nothing stayed. Without hesitation, Maren volunteered every free weekend to help. She painted walls in the new workshop. She organized boxes filled with tools. She labeled shelves more neatly than Rowan ever could. She even convinced him to donate old furniture he had kept only because he couldn't bear throwing away memories attached to it. She gently reminded him that making room wasn't the same as losing something. On moving day, sunlight filled every room of the modest apartment above the new workshop. They carried boxes until afternoon. Rowan insisted Maren rest while he unpacked the kitchen. Within minutes she had fallen asleep on the couch, completely exhausted. Her face looked peaceful in a way he rarely saw on adults. He noticed the small scrape on her hand from lifting heavy boxes. He noticed how she had skipped lunch because she didn't want the movers waiting. He noticed she had spent the entire day helping create a home she didn't even live in. That was when the joke escaped his mouth. "Just move in." Then came her sleepy answer. "Which side of the bed is mine?" She finally opened her eyes, saw the surprise on his face, and laughed until tears formed. But Rowan couldn't laugh. Because somewhere deep inside, he realized he wanted that impossible little joke to become real. Instead of pretending nothing had happened, he admitted something he hadn't confessed to anyone in years. He told her he was terrified. Not of commitment. Not of sharing a home. He was terrified of believing happiness could last. Maren listened without interrupting. She didn't promise forever. She didn't make grand speeches. She simply reached over, squeezed his hand, and told him that fear only wins when people stop showing up for each other. For the first time in years, Rowan allowed himself to hope. They officially began dating soon afterward, although very little changed. They still spent afternoons restoring furniture together. They still argued playfully about whose coffee tasted better. They still visited neighborhood yard sales searching for forgotten treasures. Life felt wonderfully ordinary. Then everything nearly fell apart. One morning, Rowan received notice that his biggest commercial client had unexpectedly canceled a major contract. Nearly 60% of his yearly income disappeared overnight. Bills quickly piled up. He quietly considered selling the workshop. He didn't tell Maren immediately because he didn't want her future connected to his failure. But she discovered the paperwork while organizing invoices. She wasn't angry that money had become tight. She was hurt that he believed he had to carry the burden alone. Old fears returned. Rowan believed she deserved someone more successful. Someone without constant setbacks. Someone who could promise certainty. Instead of arguing, Maren asked him to walk through the workshop. She pointed toward dozens of repaired chairs, cabinets, and tables. Each one had once looked hopeless. Each one survived because someone refused to give up too early. Then she gently reminded him of the very first thing he had ever told her. Almost anything could be repaired if someone cared enough to take the time. The words he had spoken to comfort a stranger finally returned to rescue him. Rather than closing the business, they transformed it. Maren convinced Rowan to teach weekend restoration classes. Families began attending together. Teenagers learned practical skills from older neighbors. Retired carpenters volunteered to help. People weren't simply paying to fix furniture anymore. They were paying to preserve memories. Business slowly recovered. Even more importantly, Rowan discovered that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was trust. One bright autumn afternoon, nearly a year after moving into the apartment, Rowan invited friends, neighbors, and former customers to celebrate the workshop's anniversary. The room overflowed with laughter. Children painted small wooden birdhouses. Older couples shared stories about family heirlooms. The workshop no longer felt like a business. It felt like a community. Near the entrance sat the same gray couch where everything had quietly changed months earlier. Someone jokingly asked whether it was comfortable. Rowan smiled. "Very comfortable," he answered. "Especially if someone you love falls asleep on it." Everyone laughed except Maren. She simply looked at him with the same gentle smile she had worn that unforgettable afternoon. Later that day, still surrounded by sunlight streaming through the open windows, Rowan carried out one final surprise. He presented Maren with a beautifully restored wooden keepsake box crafted from leftover pieces of damaged furniture collected over the years. Every piece had once been considered useless. Together they had become something beautiful. Inside rested a handwritten letter instead of a ring. The letter explained that love had never rescued him by making life easy. It rescued him by proving difficult days no longer had to be faced alone. He ended by asking whether she still remembered her answer from the couch. Before he could finish reading aloud, Maren quietly interrupted him. She said she had never changed her mind. She still wanted to know which side of the bed was hers. There wasn't a dry eye anywhere in the workshop. Friends applauded. Neighbors hugged one another. Even customers who barely knew the couple smiled through tears because everyone recognized the deeper truth hidden inside that simple question. Home is never defined by walls, furniture, or addresses. Home is the person who stays when life becomes inconvenient. Months later, they didn't move into a grand house overlooking mountains or oceans. They remained above the workshop where mornings began with coffee, sunlight, and sawdust drifting through open windows. Some days business was busy. Some days it was slow. They still disagreed over paint colors and laughed over burnt pancakes. Life remained beautifully imperfect. The old gray couch stayed exactly where it had always been. Whenever visitors asked why they never replaced it with something newer, Rowan simply smiled. Some furniture becomes too valuable because of the memories it carries. That couch had witnessed the exact moment fear stopped making decisions and hope quietly took its place. Before this story comes to its close, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe people deserve a second chance after heartbreak, or share the moment when someone made you feel at home again. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the years passed, Rowan often watched sunlight pour through the workshop windows while Maren greeted customers with the same warmth she had once shown a lonely craftsman who believed his best days were behind him. Every repaired chair that left the shop reminded him that broken things are not worthless. Every smile from a grateful family reminded him that healing rarely happens all at once. It happens one patient day at a time, one act of kindness after another, until the cracks no longer represent failure but the courage it took to keep going. And whenever life grew uncertain, they would glance toward that old gray couch, smile at one another, and remember that sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with perfect words or dramatic promises. Sometimes they begin with an exhausted nap, a foolish little joke, and one unforgettable question that quietly changes two lives forever.